neighbors, tell all your friends. It's the answers you need to know. It's the Wyatt Sharp Show.
Welcome to the show today. Steve Clark, Ontario's Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, is joining me. Hello, Steve, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. You're famous. I'm glad that I can join the ranks of the Premier and others on this podcast. So thanks so much for having me with you today.
Thank you very much. So my first question to you today is, why did you get involved in politics, and when did you decide to get involved?
Well, it's actually funny you asked me that, because I was just on a Zoom call and somebody wanted to see a picture of me with hair. So here's a shot of me as a 22-year-old mayor. So I first got involved in you can see all my long hair there. So I first got involved in politics at the age of 22. I ran for mayor of Brockville, and I campaigned in the 1982 election. I got elected. I was mayor for three-year terms. So I was mayor for 9 years in Brockville, and I went on to become the president of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. And then I got out of office in 1991 at the age of 31. And I worked for the local newspaper, and then I worked for my predecessor, Bob Runciman, for a few years. I was chief administrative officer in Leeds and the Thousand Islands, and then I got elected as an MPP 11 years ago last week, March 4th, 2010. And in the election in 2018, when we became government, on June 29th of 2018, Premier Ford instilled me as his Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. So I've been involved in politics on and off for almost 40 years. Got involved at a very young age because I believed very strongly that at whatever age you're at, you have a voice that can be heard at either the municipal, provincial, or federal level. So politics was always something that interested me, Wyatt, and it just happened that I made a decision to put my name on a ballot back just after I graduated from university.
For sure. So out of any of the parties you could have chosen, why did you decide to run with the PC Party of Ontario?
Well, I firmly believe that the Ontario PC Party is a very pragmatic party that looks at government, smaller government in a way that looks after people. And you go back and look at the history of the Ontario PC Party in the province of Ontario. We governed the party for the province for many years. And we brought in some extremely important programs. I look at, even in my own riding, things like St. Lawrence College. We started the college system. We started, a very vigorous building program on our highways when we were younger. We invested in healthcare and education. And you go into communities like the one that I live in Brockville, and ridings like I represent of Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes, and you see a tremendous part of the province was built up through PC governments. I'm lucky. I had some pretty amazing cabinet ministers represent where I grew up. When I was a kid, I remember Jimmy Auld, the Honorable James A.C. Auld, coming to my high school graduation. And Minister Auld did many things for Premier Robarts, Premier Davis, then Bob Runciman, who was a multi-cabinet minister with Premier Davis, and also Premier Harris. I was very lucky to have those type of role models in my riding, who helped really shape my opinion on ultimately where I wanted to run, but also how I wanted to operate as a politician.
For sure. So my next question is on the idea of housing. So the cost of housing continues to go up. Do you think that there is a solution to bring the cost of housing down, or do you think at this point we're trying to find a solution to make sure that it doesn't go up even more?
No, I do think there's an opportunity to benefit the housing file. Obviously, there's not one thing. There's not a silver bullet that is the solve of the problem. I think in Ontario, when we took over, we had a housing file that was largely ignored by the previous government. We decided that housing supply was a particular problem. There wasn't enough houses to meet demand. So we put a variety of policies in. One of them was our our housing supply action plan, More Homes, More Choice. That was part of Bill 108 that really set the stage for a number of measures that would provide more opportunities for people to build housing, to make it easier, make it faster to build housing. And by doing so, you would ultimately have the affordability piece, that you would have to give people the options in different communities, both large and small. So there was a number of policies we put forward. Ultimately, the pandemic, stopped some of the plans, but I have to tell you that some of the metrics that we were looking at, housing starts up 15% in the province. We saw purpose-built rental, so this is rental housing. We saw that increase. More housing was built and rental last year than we've seen since 1992. So I think some of our policies did very, very well in terms of increasing housing supply.
For sure. So you mentioned that you do think that there is an opportunity to maybe try and bring the cost of housing down. So how long do you think it will take out maybe post-pandemic to bring the cost of housing down to more reasonable levels again?
Yeah, I think what we really need is to keep the same level of cooperation we had during the pandemic with the three levels of government. I'm convinced that if we continue to work with municipalities and the federal government, we'll put more money in the system at all three levels so that we can build more housing, which ultimately I hope will get the cost down. The problem we have in Ontario, quite frankly, is the fact that under the National Housing Strategy, our core housing need is so great that the federal government probably shorts us, upwards of $490 million. If we had those dollars, we could build more housing and really do a lot better job.
For sure. So my next question for today is: we see even some houses where I live, at least, costing around $700,000 to $800,000, with that being considered reasonable. And then even renting is maybe $1,800 to $2,000 a month being considered reasonable for, let's say, a basement apartment. So with that being considered reasonable, is from what you see, is housing going up province wide, or is it kind of just maybe in some more urban areas of the province?
No, I think there's a story in every city on housing need. Obviously, we want to promote more types of housing. People that live in single family homes. We want to promote the fact that if they're able to, they should consider creating a second suite, which would allow another rental unit for their community. We're encouraging municipalities, the province, the federal government to look at the vacant land that they own and see if they can repurpose it to create more housing, to work with nonprofits like Habitat for Humanity to try to create more stock out there. And then as well, I think there's a great opportunity to intensify, around in urban areas, around major transit station areas. Every, leading city in the world intensifies around transit. But yet in Ontario, we've been faced with this not in my backyard or NIMBY syndrome, where people fight that intensification. And if there's one thing that I've heard as minister since 2019 is people want to live near transit. They want to be able to get to work, and they want to be able to get home in a reasonable time. Intensifying is something that I think we also have to look at. So again, it goes back to what I said in the Housing Supply Action Plan. There's not one measure. There's multiple measures we need to do as a government. The Housing Supply Action Plan looked at a whole bunch of things: cost, mix, rent, innovation. I think we have to be innovative. And there's a lot of municipalities wide that are looking at real neat, innovative things like tiny homes that I think will help first-time home buyers and seniors that are looking to downsize. So there's lots of great ideas out there.
Yeah, no, for sure. So do you think, because a lot of the people, I had Jeff Wielden, who's a well-known local person, who's a real estate agent and a former politician, and he said at this point it's really an issue of supply and demand, and that we don't really have enough supply, and that's part of the reason why housing prices are so high. So do you believe that that's true as well?
I do. I think we inherited a supply problem, and that's why every plan that I've put forward has been based on creating more supply. We need to create more types of housing. We need to create a better mix of housing, but we really need to step things up. And if you've heard the Premier and I talk, we believe, he and I, that building of housing, we need to focus on as a government. We have to get shovels in the ground. And I think as part of our economic recovery post-COVID, we'll be judged by the amount of shovels that are in the ground. So I agree. Everything we look at in my ministry is with the lens of how we can create more housing supply.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, yeah, and I'll give you the opportunity to speak to kind of like a local perspective now for in your riding. What's housing looking like in your riding right now? Is it in terms of maybe the average housing price?
Yeah, we're like most. We've seen increases in housing prices as the pandemic has pushed people out of the GTA. Even though Brockville's 3.5 hours away from the GTA, we're starting to see people from other urban areas move into our area. So we are seeing the increase in housing price. I think there are some municipalities that are looking at some of those innovative things like tiny homes. There's also an incredible appetite to build new affordable housing. The majority of our community housing stock was built, when I was a kid, in the early 70s. We haven't seen a big influx. And I think both what the federal and provincial government are trying to do is they're really trying to encourage people to build. And I think that's the issue. So, whether it's in Brockville or Belleville, whether it's in, Oro or Oro Medante, you're going to have, challenges, and we need to build. That's plain and simple.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, we've talked about housing, but because you are a member of the government still, and kind of to talk about it on a bit of a local perspective for your riding and for some of the people who are listening who are from your riding, let's kind of go over to the COVID area. So there's been weeks during the pandemic where no vaccine shipments have been made to Canada. I interviewed Monty McNaughton, and he specifically said that the Premier is the one who is calling the CEOs of vaccine companies, when realistically that should be a responsibility of the federal government. But should people be concerned that the deadline of September 2021 to get all Canadians vaccinated is unrealistic? And do you believe all Ontarians will be able to be vaccinated by that time, or specifically the people in your riding?
Yeah, I was very worried early on that we weren't, federal government hadn't secured enough vaccines. I'm very encouraged today to see that there's a fourth vaccine that's been approved by Health Canada. So I do think there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Now, in saying that, local ridings like mine, rural ridings, I am still concerned at the ability of the health unit to get things out. And I've always been someone who has supported the community to get involved. And the one thing that I've realized under COVID-19 is everybody's willing to band together. Everybody's willing to help each other. And I think there's this true volunteer spirit is out there that we can rally the community and get people vaccinated. So while I was, a bit down on the federal government at the start for not getting enough vaccines, the fact that we do have now 4 different vaccines that are approved by Health Canada, I'm, my message to people in my riding is we're starting to see a light at the end of the tunnel. And starting on Monday, I'm hoping that the booking system that my local health unit is putting together is going to deliver for the people of my area.
For sure. So in my, as you just mentioned, we've seen 4 vaccines get approved by Health Canada. In my riding right now, we're kind of focusing on vaccinating, I believe, people 80 plus. I know that my 88-year-old great grandma just got the vaccine yesterday. And
oh, that's great.
That was definitely a relief for all of us. But what is the situation in your riding? Because I know it's different all across the province. Who's the demographic that's being vaccinated in your riding right now?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. So you mentioned your grandma. So my mother-in-law, my wife's mom, lives in Gananoque in my riding. So we got a call from her clinic, her family health team, indicating that because of her age, she's there. So we now have been emailed a list of 4 immunization areas in the area. One of them in Brockville is no longer taking appointments. I guess they must be full, but she's got 3 other choices. So we'll take her to the vaccination center and she'll get vaccinated. My mom's over 80 as well. She lives in Brockville. She hasn't got a call yet from her family doctor, although I think she has registered with the local health unit. So, again, it is a process. The city just, or sorry, the province just announced the pilot project. So next door in the riding in Kingston, there's some pharmacies that have started to indicate that they'll have the AstraZeneca virus. So that'll be people who will be between 60 and 64. So it'll be people born between 1957 and 1961. So I think, we're starting to see, and again, starting Monday, you'll start to see more needles in arms moving forward. But it is, there is that concentration of people in long-term care homes, retirement homes, and people that are over 80. That is the focus right now.
For sure. So our next topic is small businesses. So they've obviously been negatively impacted by COVID-19. Some of them just losing revenue in the yearly period, or some of them having to unfortunately close their doors. What steps have you taken in your community to ensure that small businesses can stay open?
Yeah, well, we want to make sure that small businesses are aware of the government programs as well. Obviously, when the province was in lockdown, everyone was sort of on the same in the same boat if you were non-essential. Our riding's been lucky. We were one of the first ones to go back to green. Now I know that there have been outbreaks outside of my riding, but within the public health unit area up in Lanark County that will probably cause our area to go into the yellow or perhaps the orange starting tomorrow. That'll still allow businesses to open. I think the challenge that I see on the horizon is we've got a tremendous amount of tourism businesses that are open only in the summer because of the fact that, I represent the world famous Thousand Islands and the beautiful Rideau Lakes and Rideau River system. So tourism is a big aspect. Small businesses have really been hurt hard. And I want to make sure, and I've spent, a lot of resources communicating to businesses in my riding about the programs that are available for them. And we're going to keep working with them. And I want to encourage people to shop local. We've got to support those local businesses as part of our economic recovery. So, it's vitally important.
For sure. So our last topic today is the 2022 Ontario election, which is only about in June. It will be about a year away. So why should the people in your riding re-elect you as their MPP when that time comes? And then have any opponents been chosen yet for you?
I haven't heard of any other candidates that have been nominated. I was nominated some time ago. As I said to you, Wyatt, I've been an MPP since March of 2010. And over the last 11 years, I've proven both in opposition and in government that I work hard and that I get results. And, I've just put out a number of flyers out in my riding to talk about things that I've been able to deliver on, money to our hospitals. We're the one thing that I'll put up in my riding against anybody, we've actually got two huge PPE manufacturing plants. We've got a $75 million plant that's building N95 masks here in Brockville, a 3M expansion. We've got a $100 million expansion to Greenfield Ethanol that will be built. We'll be manufacturing hand sanitizer grade alcohol for Canada. So, we've been able to, in a pandemic, bring two world-class plants that are going to serve us well over the future. We've been able to bring ministers here almost every month, delivering on promises that we made during the election. I work hard and I get results, and I'm going to continue to work hard over the next year and a bit to serve my constituents and to fight for our fair share. And that's what it's all about.
For sure. So that was my last question. So thank you very much again, Steve, for joining me today. And it's been great talking with you.
Yeah, it's been great talking to you. And thanks so much for doing what you're doing. It's tremendous to see such a young person deliver such a wonderful message. You're an inspiration. And I just want to thank you so much for having me today. Thanks so much.
Thank you.